Hello, this is Insane Monster, and as you can see from the thumbnail, this is part one of What If Deku Had Spiral Power. In part zero, we've described how he got his spiral power, and now we'll describe the influence that spiral power has had on the two people closest to Deku in terms of his training with Kachan, or sorry, in terms of training with Bakugo and all that. The spiral energy, which is basically the energy of evolution itself in a world where humans have evolved to have superpowers and all that. To make it simple as I could possibly think it, uh, it's really self-explanatory. The power of evolution of the spiral energy caused both Bakugo and Inko, it causes their quirks to evolve and become stronger. In Bakugo's case, he's able to, like, he can still do his normal explosions and all that, but now he can make little orbs come out of his hands, little orange orbs that he calls charges. They can float around him until he controls them to send them flying in a particular direction. Currently, he isn't able to do anything fancy like that, anything quite so fancy or out there yet. He needs a bit more training with precision before that. As for Inko, more or less, her telekinesis has seriously leveled up to the point where she could easily lift multiple vehicles without breaking a sweat. And this is all because of the influence of being uh, close to Deku. So we go to the beginning of the anime where the teacher throws the papers up in the air just like always and says that they all want to be heroes. They, as he describes the two students that applied to go to UA. They aren't surprised by this. Both Bakugo and Deku are pretty powerful. Deku's power allows him to enhance his body's strength, making it more durable, stronger, and can even form spiraling forms of energy around him, whether it be his whole body or just a part of it. Though he isn't able to create solid constructs, well, unless he wants to cause some damage to himself. It's harder to do it using just his body. So he still takes the notes and stuff like always. And Bakugo says, "Hmm, the hell kind of hero are you taking notes on now?" He tells Bakugo about the fight at the train station that he saw against the giant vacation villain, the Kamui Woods, and Mount Lady. Though Bakugo isn't really interested in other heroes. He's still kind of arrogant and self-absorbed, but that's just Bakugo. As Midori As Midoriya, Deku, Izuku, whatever you want to call him, heads home, going the same route as in canon, uh, the sludge villain still pops out and tries to take over his body. But this time, it didn't take Deku much difficulty due to the fact that when he was coiling around him, he used the spiral power to form basically a swirling barrier around him that forced the sludge villain to spin and get his sludge bodies flung all over the place. The villain was successfully unconscious from being spun around and flung all over, which is when All Might burst in saying, "I am here," which he just sees the sludges everywhere and there's just a kid there. Obviously, Deku asks for his autograph and ends And once the villain is bottled up, All Might jumps away. Though, unknown to him, his the pockets in his pants where the sledge villain was, got ripped whenever he jumped so hard to fly. Oh, well, it looks like flying, but it's just jumping really, really high and far. And sorry for any background noises. There are some things that are being tended to around my place. So if you hear any rustling, creaking, or anything like that, I'm sorry. Now, the sludge villain does get out, and it does grab Bakugo. And similar in canon, Deku goes over and sees what's going on, seeing that the heroes aren't doing anything. And when he takes a look at who the sludge villain has, he sees that it's Bakugo. And as for the destruction in that area, it's a lot worse. He's trying to use his charges to get the villain from all directions, making them go around him, and then just hit the sludge villain wherever he can think of to try to get out. Though it isn't doing as much damage as he would like. But back to Deku, he rushes in past the heroes, his eyes starting to glow green with a spiral pattern in them. He reaches out and shoves his hand into the sludge. While the villain was distracted from being blinded from one of Bakugo's charges and it blowing up in his face. He grabs on to Bakugo and then starts charging the spiral energy, creating another barrier around both him and Bakugo. Once again, sending him the sludge villain flying. Though this time he was a little bit more prepared and went for a direct attack. The barrier was keeping him at bay, but All Might still buffed up again and knocked the villain clean out. Izuku and Bakugo were applauded for their strong quirks and how you and even asked when they make it graduating from a hero school that they should come be their sidekicks and all that. As they left, Bakugo says, "I didn't need your help, man." Deku just looked at him saying, "Sure, sure, but it really didn't look like you were able to breathe, so." Which just pisses Bakugo off with him storming away saying, "Whatever." As he went, as he turned, he saw that All Might appeared around the corner. All Might congratulates him on the good work he did, but instantly deflates, freaking Deku out. He claims that that he's a fake, but then All Might explains his wounds and everything. Then offers him one for all. Deku is just so pumped and excited, though he thinks that he should probably tell All Might something about his quirk, or quote unquote quirk. And he asks him to come see him, come to his house for a little bit so he can explain some stuff. All Might's weirded out, but he nevertheless agrees. And once they get there, Inko, which due to the spiral energy is not short. She's like prime Inko, like when Deku was a kid. And she asked, "Honey, who is this man?" Deku introduces him as All Might, which he buffs up for a second, then goes back, which just shocks her. Once they sat down, he tells his mom that that All Might offered to train him, and that he wanted to explain something about his quirk that was more or less a side effect that happened to people around him. Inko understood, and they explained how Inko's quirk was before, only able to move small items. But now it's so much more powerful. All Might's not sure how to take this, but he kind of still he still gives the information about where to meet and said that he'll check up on what he's told him about his mother's quirk to verify, because this craziness needs verification for him to believe. He left and had his detective friend check up on Inko Midoriya and her quirk. Sure enough, the quirk that she had previously, the way it was, it's and how it is now are completely different power wise. So he had to accept it. His next successor of One for All could further evolve the quirks of others. He wasn't really sure what the effects of One for All would have on that kind of quirk, though we know it's not a quirk. We continue to Dagobah Beach, where All Might explains that he's going to clean this entire beach. All, with Deku charging up the spiral power in his body, visually it's like green kind of fire coming off of his hair and a bit down his body. Using it and along with all the other training and studying and everything, he can he was able to clean it up in about 2.5 months. After that, All Might gave him the hair. Once he ate it, they talked a little bit about things about his quirk and how it can be used. Uh, Knowing some things that he has some memories from Simone, and that his body would have hard time making the drills like he would always wanted to, like in the memories he got from Simone. He explains that if he had some support gear that he could pour the power into, he could do some even more incredible stuff. He thought for a moment and said, "Hmm, well, the daughter of a friend of mine is actually in town right now. And she's pretty good at making support gear. If you give me some details, write them down so I can hand it to her, she could probably make something for you." Deku is ecstatic and says, "Oh, really? That's great." He writes everything down and gives it to All Might, which he then takes it to the daughter of his friend, who is, if you haven't seen the movie, the first My Hero Academia movie, it's Melissa Shield. She sees what he wants her to make and gets to work. Essentially, it's two glove gauntlet things that go all the way to the elbow that have a similar look to Gurren Lagann's hands from the hand to the elbow with the forearm and everything, with little openings on each side of the elbow, each side of the wrist, and an opening on the palm of the hand. He gets it done and goes to the next thing. A jetpack looking thing, though the description she thinks was odd. It was supposed jetpack, just a slick design, no wings or anything, with a opening that would be hollowed out and have a opening both on the top and the bottom that would more or less be an outlet for the energy that would be poured into the jetpack to be released from. More or less, with this, Deku can pour spiral energy into it, and then it shoots out of the openings that open and close. So, besides the mechanism to open and close the top and the bottom of it for different movements, with different attacks I have in mind. He he's not sure what exactly what kind of quirk the this guy, her uncle Mike, is having the support gear made for, but she is curious. While they're training with him trying to use One for All, since Deku already has a handle on using energy, uh, controlling One for All isn't that hard. In his normal state, he can handle about 10%. In his enhanced state, with his body being reinforced with One for All, it's jumped up to, let's say, 30%. Now, while they're training, Melissa shows up and with the gear and hands it over to Deku. He puts it on, and she's wondering what exactly is he going to be doing with this gear, Uncle Mike. Uh, and he just says, "Just wait and see." With this, and able to pour the spiral energy into them, he's able to create solid drills now without putting any strain on his body. And he's also able to fly now with the new jetpack. He's able to make the basic drills as right now, as well as drill missiles coming out of the openings on the gauntlets and stuff, as well as some little ports that were added to the back of the jetpack. After, let's say, 3 months, Melissa comes every now and then and hangs out while they're training, taking notes on any improvements that she can make on the support equipment. And at about this time, Deku in this one is a lot more confident and has a lot more, self respect and confidence in himself and his decisions. So he just goes out and outwardly asks uh, Melissa on a date, which she does say yes to. And they actually go out for a month and a half, which they do get along pretty well. After some time, they uh, and walked by on the street while on one of their dates, where a villain ended up attacking, causing damage to part of a building. It was going straight for Melissa. Deku went to try to get in front of her, but before he was able to, Melissa began uh, pumping out red energy out of her. If you don't remember the movie, Melissa is one of the people who doesn't have a quirk. And since there's no quirk to evolve, what do you think she's going to get if she gets close to somebody like Deku with spiral power? A red spiraling a red spiraling energy blocked the rubble, ultimately blasting it away. From the ends of her hair were red like fire. She was freaking out, wondering what was going on. They got her to the hospital to check her out, and from the readings that they have from Deku's energy as well as Melissa's new energy, it was practically the same energy. All Might's like, how did this happen? Deku just looks at him and replies with, well, You know how my power causes others that I get close to their quirks to evolve and become a stronger version of them? Well, I'm guessing that when it comes to somebody who doesn't have a quirk to evolve, they'll just develop a similar power to mine. So, so basically, she has her own spiral power. Melissa is excited. She has a quirk now. She's just ecstatic. And All Might's thinking, is this because I gave him one for all? This is insanity. Everybody snapped out, thinking, oh my god, what am I going to tell David? He asked me to keep an eye on her, and now this madness. So there is some explaining to do. He explains about somebody he's been training, and that his power ended up is one that causes evolution in others, that ultimately gave his daughter a quirk of her own, but it was similar to his, at least uh, the function wise. So people that get close to Melissa now will also be evolved as well. Some time passed, and uh, they decided to tell Melissa the truth about One for All. She was taken aback, obviously, and says, and takes a couple of deep breaths. Some time and saying that she did understand and why it had to be kept a secret. And they continued on like that, where some time passed, and Melissa told them that she decided to go to UA on the with the hero course. They were surprised, but didn't really give them that much of a shock. Now that she has a strong power of her own, she can manage her own kind of ability to fight now. She even, before telling them this, she even fixed up some her own version of the same kind of equipment that she made for Deku, which is a white gauntlet and jetpack with a red tint to it. What that means is that it looks white, but when the light comes off of it, like the reflection of light off of the white, the light looks red on the equipment. Though they found out that she was a bit different. She was able to make the drills, the normal drills like Deku, but she wasn't able to make the drill missiles. Instead, she was able to use drill whips, similar to the ones Lord Genome, the Spiral King, used. So, more or less, both Deku and Melissa are close range fighters with the normal drills, but with Deku has more long range abilities with the drill missiles, while Melissa has a mid range capability with the drill whips. So we continue, and it goes all the way to the UA exam. Now, you're probably wondering about a certain character that was in Gurren Lagann. And yes, I mean Bunta. Ever since Simon passed away, Bunta's been kind of just chilling. He knows that Deku's just training and becoming stronger to become a hero and all that. He has been taking an interest and been watching from a distance. But other than that, he's just been kind of sleeping in Deku's room. And he doesn't really like, he's a little wary about the other people besides Deku. More or less, he has to kind of warm up to him. He did get pretty depressed after Shimo passed, after all. And now, for the UA entrance exam, All Might explains that due to the fact that Melissa's power just awoken recently, he was they were they granted her permission to use her gauntlets, but she wasn't allowed to use the jetpack. As for Deku, he wasn't allowed to use any of the equipment that Melissa made for him, since he's had his power for a lot longer. Deku just replied with, "Man, I'm the show off too," which Melissa just kind of laughs at him. And now we continue to the exam itself. On the theory exam, uh, Deku does basically the same as in canon, and in the practical, he begins stretching and all that. He still gets chewed out by. Uh, he still gets chewed out by Ida when he was muttering. And as for Bakugo, he knows about him dating Melissa and him thinking, "Damn that nerd." And now for the entrance exam, Deku is just getting ready. And once President Mike sign gives the go for the test to begin, instantly he charges up his spiral energy to start off with and just goes right for it. Where people are just seeing a kid with some flames, green flames coming out of his hair, smashing the robots one by one with spiraling energy around his fists, forearms, as well as his legs. And they're pretty impressed. He racks up a lot of points. When he thinks he has enough, he says, maybe I should get some more. Until he starts hearing some rumbling, and everybody's running away. When he turns to see what's going on, he just sees a 0 pointer. He figured since it didn't have any points to give him, that he should probably just go. But before he could, he saw a girl with brown hair stuck under some rubble. His heart just began to pound, and he ran right towards the robot. In his haste, One for All began to activate, and now instead of just green flames, green lightning began to shoot out, and his arm just began to glow. He stuck it forward, and a giant drill just appeared on his arm. With the flames and lightning coming off of his body right now, he used it as a propellant to fly straight toward the lower part of the robot, yelling, "Giga, drill, break!" Going right into the lower part of the robot and making a sharp turn to go clean up, shooting out of the robot's head. He looked back and saw that the robot was beginning to fall forward about and would crush the girl. He yelled out, "Oh no, you don't!" The drill burst into energy and moved around Deku to form around his legs this time. Using the same method of propellant, he went right down towards the robot, yelling, "Giga Impact!" Slamming into the robot again, drilling through it, forcing it the opposite direction, causing it to explode. As for Deku, he went all the way through and just burrowed underneath the ground. The people that saw this were thinking, "Is that kid dead? Did he just blow up with the robot?" Until they start hearing an odd sound and vibrations coming from underneath their feet. And lo and behold, Deku burst out of the ground. He stood on his feet, exhausted, thinking, "Oh God, that hurts so much. Ah, okay. Stay focused. If I let it drop now," and that's when the siren rung that caused Deku to to just go like, "Wait, it's over already," and he was still trying to hold it together. when Recovery Girl came around and started healing everybody, even healing Ochako, the girl that I met. That if you didn't know who it was, then you need to actually watch the series, and healing her injuries from being stuck under the rubble. So he goes to Deku and says, "It's okay now, boy. You can power down. Who are you?" "I'm Recovery Girl, the school nurse. I have a healing quirk." And he just smirks, saying, "Oh, good. I'm gonna need it in a sec. My bones might have a few cracks in them. Wasn't able to reinforce them enough to keep keep them from all the damage. But there is something else. The moment he drops the energy that he was using to reinforce his body, wounds began opening up all over his body and started bleeding, gushing blood, and falling. Recovery Girl hurried up and used her quirk to heal him. From what she can tell, that energy tore up his muscle system as well as even going as far as to make openings in his body. The only thing that was keeping them closed and from him from bleeding was the energy reinforcing his body, keeping it together. And he did have tiny little fractures and cracks all across his skeletal system from the strain. His body isn't meant to put out all that power all at once like that. It just puts a massive strain on him. Of course, he passes out from the stamina drain, but not for long. About 45 minutes, I say, and he gets up. He meets up with Melissa, and they go off waiting for the results for the entry test. Once they got it, Deku found out that both him and Melissa ended up in the hero course. Melissa actually did pretty well, using her drills to take care of villain robots that got a little bit too close for comfort, and the drill whips to deal with the robot villains at mid range. Even getting some hero points dealing with robot villains that were about to really hurt some of the applicants. Now, this was part one of What If Deku Had Spiral Power. Hope you enjoyed. Please remember to like, comment, and subscribe. And see you next time for the next What If. Later.